Inside of the Führer bunker on the 30th of April 1945, Adolf Hitler took his own life, whilst the city of Berlin around him crumbled. The Second World War had drastically turned against the Germans, as the conflict saw the Red Army and the Soviets push east towards the German heartlands. What hindered the Germans also was the Allied advancement following the Normandy landings. With this combined, the German army was pushed back greatly, and defeat was in sight for Hitler and his Third Reich. Germany had been decimated by Allied bombing raids, and it was certain that the end was nigh. The Red Army surrounded Berlin on the 23rd of April 1945, and Goebbels made an order for any citizen to defend the city. However, at this time, Hitler must have been considering his own downfall and his death. Today we look at the men who burned Hitler, the men specifically tasked with disposing of Adolf Hitler's body. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Hitler had remained inside the Führer bunker for a while, and it was certain that the final battle of the war in Europe would result in the Battle of Berlin. As the Red Army encroached, Hitler suffered a complete nervous breakdown when he found out that previous orders he had issued to an SS military general had been disobeyed. He launched an angry tirade against his military commanders, calling them treacherous, and for the first time he admitted on the 22nd of April 1945 that the war had been lost. He then announced he would stay in Berlin until the very end, and he would take his own life by shooting himself. Following this, he then asked an SS doctor, Werner Haas, what would be the most reliable method of taking his own life, and he was recommended the poison and pistol method, taking a dose of cyanide poison along with a gunshot to the head. After this, things were very intense inside of the bunker, and Hitler's dog was subject to cyanide testing, and this German Shepherd companion was later killed. Days later, Berlin had been completely cut off from the rest of the nation, with radio communications cut, and to add salt into the wounds, Hitler had received news of Heinrich Himmler's treachery, trying to negotiate surrender with the Western Allies. Hitler considered this treason and was furious with the leader of the SS. Hitler ordered Himmler's representative from the SS shot for desertion, and at this time the Red Army were very close to storming the Reich Chancellery, the heart of the Nazi government, just above the Führer bunker. After midnight on the 29th of April, he married Eva Braun, his longtime girlfriend, and he then saw this as a reward for her loyalty. This took place in a small ceremony inside the map room in the bunker, and then shortly after a wedding breakfast, Hitler disappeared with his secretary Traudl Junger to dictate his last will and testament. In this it carried instructions that Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz would become the head of state. Now at some point on the 29th of April in the afternoon, Hitler found out that his close friend and ally Benito Mussolini had been shot dead and executed by Italian partisans. This had a profound effect on the dictator of Germany, as he realised he did not want to go the same way that Mussolini did. Mussolini was shot, but what happened after greatly shaped how Hitler dictated his final moments and how they would be. Mussolini was publicly displayed after death inside a market in Milan, and along with his mistress's corpse, they were abused and mocked by the Italians. The crowd spat on, urinated on, punched and even threw items at the corpses, which were hanged upside down. Hitler decided that he did not want his or his wife's bodies treated in this way and to be made a spectacle of. With this, he ordered that after his death, his body should be burned to get rid of the remains, so this could not happen. At some point, with the Soviets less than 500 metres away from the Führer bunker, Hitler and Eva Braun disappeared into Hitler's private study inside of the bunker. They had previously said goodbye to their adjutants and fellow members of the bunker, such as Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann. Guarding the door was Hitler's personal adjutant, SS Sturmbannführer Otto Gürnscher. Gürnscher had been entrusted with the job of ensuring that Hitler's body was cremated after his death. After a short amount of time, a gunshot was heard from the study, and in rushed Gürnscher with Heinz Linger, Hitler's valet, along with Martin Bormann. When they entered the study, they found Hitler and Braun's lifeless bodies slumped on a sofa. Hitler's right temple was dripping with blood, and his pistol was at his feet, and Braun was also dead, having consumed cyanide, and it was noted that the room smelled of almonds, a side effect of cyanide poisoning. Gürnscher then left the study and informed those who had gathered that Hitler was dead. He stated this in the briefing room, and present was Goebbels and military generals Krebs and Bergdorf. A few others also saw the body of Hitler, and whilst this happened, Heinz Linger and another man rolled up Hitler's body in a rug, which was found in the study. Hitler had issued written and verbal instructions that he and his wife's bodies were to be carried up the stairs and through the bunker's emergency exit to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery. So Hitler's body was carried up these steps by these men, and then it was taken into the garden. The Reich Chancellery garden had been hit by bombing attacks and artillery, and there were a number of craters within the garden. Hitler and Braun's bodies were wrapped in rugs and then were placed in one of these craters, and their bodies were then covered in petrol. Berlin at the time was suffering from a lack of fuel, and initially the petrol did not work. But who was there? Who were those people who were present at the burning of Adolf Hitler, and who specifically burned his body? Present was Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's close friend and Minister of Propaganda, Martin Bormann, a man who was obsessed with gaining favour inside of the inner circle, Otto Genscher, Hitler's adjutant, Heinz Linger the valet, Erich Kempka, Hitler's primary chauffeur, Peter Hergel, an SS lieutenant colonel, and a member of Hitler's personal bodyguard, Ewald Lindloff, an SS officer, and Hans Reiser, another SS officer. Together these men ensured and were tasked with the burning of the body of Hitler. Now initially the attempts to ignite the corpse was unsuccessful, and then as bombs and artillery fell around them, Heinz Linger was ordered back into the bunker to get some paper. He then passed this to Martin Bormann, who then lit the paper before throwing this onto the body of Hitler and Braun. With this the two corpses caught fire, and then the group of men all raised their arms in a Hitler salute as the body burned just outside of the bunker's doorway. So it was these men who burned the body of Adolf Hitler, specifically Martin Bormann, who lit the touch paper to burn the dictator of Nazi Germany. Bormann had acted as Hitler's private secretary and was a man who gained a huge amount of power from his closeness with Hitler. He was a man who was disliked by others inside the inner circle, but Hitler described him in his final days as my most faithful party comrade, and he was even an executor of Hitler's will. Around an hour after Hitler's body was burned, Heinz Linger and two more SS officers rolled up the blood-stained rug inside Hitler's study, and they then burned this as well. The Red Army continued to shell the Reich Chancellery in the area, unaware that Hitler's body was burning shortly nearby. As time went on, further SS officers continued to add more fuel and petrol onto the bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun to ensure that nothing was left. Heinz Linger later stated that the fire did not wholly destroy Hitler's remains. One issue was the fact they were burned in the open, and this made it difficult for a full cremation to occur. The corpses burned for around 2.5 hours, and then at 6:30 p.m, Lindloff and Reiser then covered the ash remains inside of a bomb crater. So the men who burned or were present at the burning of Adolf Hitler's body were Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann, Heinz Linger, Otto Genscher, Erich Kempka, Peter Hergel, Ewald Lindloff, and Hans Reiser, with it being Martin Bormann who was the one who ignited the fire. Much of what we know about the burning of Hitler's body comes from the later testimony of Otto Genscher. However, days after the burning, the Soviets did manage to locate the very few remains of Hitler. What happened to Hitler's remains and body will be covered in another video. However, it was clear that after hearing of his former friend Mussolini's public humiliation after death, Hitler imposed his will and decision that his body should be burned. There wasn't much left after the burning, just a few remains that today allegedly remain in the care of the Russian government and are locked away in a secret Soviet archive. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thanks so much for watching.